Going to be eating a shock dart, but he's able to makes it win anything. Sam, defend your team because they haven't won. Oh my God!
Strap yourselves in. It's another 1 hour episode.
Oh yeah.
Spike defused.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Press 4 to Defuse, your weekly spot for Valorant esports news and discussion. We're back on this week talking all things Masters, talking all things, almost talking a lot of things. There's some exciting stuff in the air. I'm Darth Mike, joined by Sam and Paul. Sam, how you feeling this week?
I am so amped. The last 2 weeks of Masters have been unbelievable. There have been some absolutely nutty results and some really close games. And I'm looking forward to diving into it.
And Paul, how you doing this week?
I mean, we get to talk about Collegiate Valorant later, so great. I'm doing great.
For anyone who doesn't
Thank you
know,
for asking.
This is Paul's baby, is Collegiate Valorant.
Yep.
That is. I would say that's your niche more than
Paul
anyone
loves
else.
Collegiate.
I gotta
I
hold
love
it in.
women.
I love women. We all support women on this
fair.
podcast. See, we
honestly
got to be
support
careful.
women.
The implication there is that the rest of us don't. You got to be careful with that on the internet now.
Okay, but I really love women, okay?
Don't need a press for is over party yet. No hashtags, folks. Keep the hashtags positive. I'm sure we'll do something somewhere down the line. You know, it's inevitable. Moving into the news here. It's time for the news of the last week. This is a segment we like to call Run It Back, where we run back through the news of the last week. It's presented by Temple University. Shout outs to Temple University, as always, for supporting the pod. Let's dive into it. First up, sad news. SOAR exiting Valorant. They had no shot at franchise spot. They were, in fact, denied a franchise spot, and so they have elected to cut bait on their roster. Hot takes. How do we feel about this? Paul, hit it.
I mean, we're going to be seeing a lot of this in the next 2-3 months, right? We already saw LG drop their roster. LG had accomplished infinitely more in Valorant than an organization like SOAR did. So unfortunate for SOAR. It's not surprising that they were denied a franchise spot compared to, you know, a lot of the orgs with a lot more funding, a lot more success. But it is unfortunate that, you know, when it comes to organizations like this, sometimes it is like make or break, especially, you know, with franchising. You either get the franchise spot and you get all the publicity that comes with it and the money that comes with that, or sometimes you have to cut and run.
Just Sam, before I get your point in here, I've just noticed something hilarious about this video. This guy just has the box set of the Lord of the Rings extended editions posed on his desk as the most blatant, like, I'm a nerd. I'm cool and hip with the kids.
Oh
like,
my God.
He is young, so I believe that he legitimately owns those. But I just love the fact that they were probably like, okay, so we need to frame up this photo. You got the guitars. That's
Bro, the
good.
guitars
the
too,
posters.
right?
Those are cool. Can you go get something to establish nerd cred? He's like, I've got the extended editions of the Lord of the Rings. Like, great. Now position it so that the spines are pointed right at the camera and everyone knows that you like the Lord of the Rings. Make sure of that. All right, now Sam, back to the topic, back to your reaction. I just had to get that in there while it was fresh.
Your brain just it amazes me sometimes. Anyway, couple of thoughts on this. The one being, I'm trying to remember what's word because you just kind of completely did me with
The
that
one being,
tangent.
why are we talking about this instead of the Lord of the Rings?
Yeah, I mean, would you
So
say
guys,
that
this is
there's
no
a
longer a Valorant
fellowship
podcast.
of the franchising?
I
Are there
remember one of the
two roster
points.
spots? Okay, hit me with it.
So there are only 8 to 10 spots in America. So that, I mean, it's more sure, they've achieved quite a bit in the esports scene, but are they really up at the 10 best potential option? Not really. I don't know who they're going to be. Apparently, according to some of the insiders, there are a few surprises. So I'm looking forward to seeing what that's going to be, particularly region. For NA, so it's probably going to be pretty cut and dry. The other thought that I had was like, I feel like this is premature because yes, we only have a very, very skeleton of what's going to happen in 2023, but from it, it's going to be fairly robust. Just before you actually know, okay, he does every possibility. Riot's going to be like, look, 23. Folks are going to go, wait a minute, let me in. But I feel like it's so premature to make now when there's still a possibility there could be something big.
So, apparently, we're losing your audio.
Oh no!
That might be all of us. You sound fine to me, so it's probably just Cody's
fault.
Well,
Cody said Cody. Sam was lagging.
Oh well, then I'm refresh Sam. I'll rant in the meantime. I mean, I think this makes a lot of sense. I think that it is the least surprising move ever. I think Soar is directly saying this is because we don't have the money and we have to figure out how to sustain and survive here, which isn't surprising right now. In case your head's been in the sand, we're in an economic downturn globally. It's not good times for investment money. A lot of people are taking their bag and going home if they still have a bag. It's going to be tough and it's going to be tight for a lot of esports orgs, and there are probably going to be a lot of people who shutter their doors. And in the meantime, there's a lot of orgs who are trying to trim the fat. And shocker, Valorant is not a profitable esport as it stands right now. If you wind up in one of those soft franchising spots, it's probably more viable. But an org like Soar was never going to sniff that realistically. And so they don't see a path towards profitability not having that franchise spot based on what's been outlined. And I don't really blame them. And I think a lot of teams are going to bow out of this because I think it's going to be incredibly expensive to do so, to maintain a roster and just, rely on the Nerd Streets and the Pittsburgh Knights of the world to actually make it viable for you to compete. So we'll see what it winds up looking at. The other thing is salaries are very inflated in Valorant right now. And so what we might wind up seeing is a course correction where you wind up having good salaries if you're actually in the franchise league, but outside of that, salaries are a fraction of what people are paying right now because that's what an org can afford to spend as a budget. I think we'll see a lot of teams make similar decisions. We've already seen it from LG. We've already seen it from Soar. I think we're probably going to get more, but we'll move on. We'll move on to the next thing because this is just sad. Speaking of sad franchising news, boom, I'm starting with the sorrow. They say, go highs then lows. I figure we start low, then we can go high. Shopify, not going to get a franchise spot. They just splashed big cash getting the LG roster. They've had a Game Changers roster for a while. They have been denied a franchising spot. They have committed themselves to staying in Valorant, which is cool, but no Shopify in the initial plans at the very least, which is kind of a boomer.
I mean, we talk about probably going to main Soar. And I mean, their very first was with the women, admittedly are the second best in the region, but I'd never heard of them prior to their foray. I'm not sure if I'm just completely ignorant.
No, they're very new. They're very new.
So I feel like that heavily works against them, and I feel like have the second best team in the region doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a top organization. And just because you've signed LG's roster, who are looking phenomenal, still doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be a top organization. So it's rough. I'm really happy to see that they're going to stick it out, unlike Soar, who, as I said, a little prematurely decided to kick.
Yeah, there might have been an outside chance once Shopify picked up like the old LG squad, right? But it was never going to be that likely that they were going to get a franchise spot. Like Sam said earlier, there's so many limited spots in North America, right? Like we're talking a max of like, what is it, 8? It's brutally competitive.
Yeah. Also, I do just want to say for Shopify in particular, there's kind of a unique circumstance where they're heavily tied to the company Shopify, who have seen a pretty big stock dip. Theoretically, they have their own pool of capital that's set aside, but I have no idea how closely tied those are. I think it's just a founder owns both, but I don't know exactly how that relationship works. And then obviously, again, not having a top-end competitive roster until just now when you bought one probably isn't a good look. I will say, I was talking to somebody last week who floated the conspiracy theory that they think Riot is going to eventually expand the league and probably in the near future. And one of the things they're doing with certain organizations is almost testing them right now. Sorry if my camera's completely wonked. It looks that way for me. It might be
for me as
wonked
well,
for everybody. So sorry about that. Technical issues happen, but we'll keep plugging
This
through it,
is
provided my audio is okay.
It's funny because Sam's
This is
camera looks
esports.
better than either of ours.
Yeah.
But, like, we have
what is
Sam,
that?
audio.
Why don't you pixelate the shit out of your camera and then your audio will be fine? It's the way of the world.
You're diverting too many resources.
All right, you ready? I'm going to do a quick refresh. Let's see if it fixes.
3, 2, 1, go. No.
That's a little better. Okay,
Oh,
let
you
me
do.
try.
You actually look better. Nice.
Expand the league because we have seen Riot do this with a lot of stuff. Oh, never mind, my camera's back to shit. We have seen Riot do this with a lot of stuff where they're like, hey, we made one decision and then the community had some backlash, so then we made another decision. Look, we're the good guys, we listen to you. So
Well,
maybe they're doing that with Val to some degree to see which teams stick around without a franchise spot. But
Sure. Well, and
know.
even if it's not some like giant conspiracy theory from Riot, right? I mean, I don't think it's unlikely at some point that it will get expanded. Keep in mind, the way that they phrased how franchising is going to work next year is quote unquote soft franchising, right?
Yes.
So it's not like a 100% hard committal to these are the only people who will be able to play at the highest level forever, right? There's room to potentially expand a little bit into that at the very least. Now, what extent and how quickly they might expand, that remains to be seen.
Yeah, it's tough. We'll move on here because we do have more things. We'll slide on through. Here's a tweet from Bo.
Oh my god.
This one's an interesting one to chat about. So let's go ahead and pull that up. Oh my god, we got other ones. Okay,
we're getting so much news in,
hot
people.
and heavy.
It's ridiculous.
We're adding it and updating it. So apparently, orgs are potentially trying to re-sign players to then hold them in contract jail, even if they don't have franchise spots. This seems like a really stupid long play for teams to me because I don't think anyone's going to be buying really, and I think it's going to be a really weird system, and I'm not sure who's not going to get a I mean, looking at some of the names that are coming out that we're just seeing as far as teams that are dropping their rosters, which we're going to be getting to in a second, hot off the presses. I can understand it. There's definitely going to be some talent there, but geez, Louise, this is your public service announcement. I don't know if we need to discuss this too much because it'll take
Speaking of
time
public service, I will just say that Bo is messaging the players of those teams and saying, hey, you haven't been told this. Your team is not getting franchising. So the hero we deserve.
That's good. That's a public service announcement. That's civil society at work there. Here's the public service announcement. If you're a player, don't fucking sign until you know if your team is a franchise spot. It completely changes your negotiations.
Yeah.
Even if you're going to re-sign with the same team, you should have all the information before you do so. Don't be stupid. Moving on.
Should we move on to like while we're on the topic of franchising? Should we hit those tweets that?
Can we pop into this new news? Can we just go straight in? Let's see. See if Cody's a master.
Oh,
hey, there he is.
A crew dropping their Valorant roster. They're out. You say what? I don't think this is actually surprising in the slightest.
It's not, because obviously they lost a lot of their top players recently, and the chances of them getting franchising is not great. But like, this was a near and dear team. It was one that we were all like really getting fond of. I do like to see that they say they'll likely return next year once the details of Tier 2 have been revealed. So cool. We're not 100% jumping the gun all the way out the boat, but this is a little sad.
I think this kind of plays to what Mike was talking about earlier, though, with like Valorant rosters are unbelievably expensive for how little money the esport is making in comparison for like on a team end, right? I mean, I can't imagine it's cheap to keep Zachary locked into a contract here, right? So if a crew's unlikely to, I mean, cheaper than some play. It's cheaper than Sentinels Shroud
you
or
on
whatever,
Zachary.
right?
No offense to Zachary, but like right now,
Overwatch
specifically,
teams?
I understand
there's
Valorant teams are
enough
spending too much
going on
money,
there.
but I don't understand who they're bidding against. I never understand this conversation. But I agree with you. Yes, he's probably making a decent amount of money.
I'm not saying, you know, whatever amount is 100. Well, that was gonna sound really mean. You know what I'm trying to say, though.
Yeah. Life's expensive to maintain.
It is
Say what you mean,
expensive,
Paul.
regardless. Yeah, I'm just.
I mean, look. Basic math is even if you're paying your players like $4K a month, which is not a competitive salary really within the realm of esports. It's a pretty budget salary for a team. And it's a
If you're
perfectly
making
reasonable salary
$0 a
demand.
month, then you're still losing a lot of money.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're playing every player on your team $4K a month, and you have 5 players, you're running $20K a month. If that's not counting a coach or any sort of staff, and that's $20K a month over a year. You're spending a shit ton of money, man. That's $200,000 plus. Like, it's expensive. That's $240,000 alone. Like, that is a lot of money.
Can we just absolute memes? So for those that don't know who Lucas Rojo is, he or Rojo, he was one of the coaches for G2 for a while. He's been, in and around, and there's been a little controversy around him. But I just saw that he did a QRT of this crew tweet, and he's like, "Welp, I was set to join a crew, but yesterday this allegedly happened. So guess I'm looking for a new team." Oh man.
I mean, it
is rough.
stinks. But the reality is, a crew is a team that is based off of Animal Crossing money, right? Like, that's where their money comes from. I'm not kidding. They have an Animal Crossing item marketplace, and that is literally where their money came from to become an esports org. They are running off of Animal Crossing money. They don't have substantial financial backing. I have no clue what that money
Tom
looks
Nook
like.
finally collecting on that debt, dude.
Maybe Tom Nook is shelling out the bells or whatever the hell they're called in Animal Crossing.
Oh my
and he's
God.
really putting up the dough. But I will say, right, like, this is the type of org that's absolutely going to feel the squeeze. And it's smart for them to drop a team at this point in time and say, we'll reassess next year, because shit, man, you have no idea what this ecosystem is going to look like for a third-party team. And if you're feeling the financial squeeze at all, this is a really risky time to be in Val if you can get out of your contracts. So moving on to the next one, we got another one. This one, substantially more financial backing to my knowledge.
Bro, it's the
NYFU,
Good God.
the New York fuck you, built a whole brand to only be in the damn esport for another month. They did a whole rebrand. They probably spent a bucket of money on it, and they're out of the game in a month.
Let's be honest, though. It is impressive how badly this team flopped.
Oh, man.
It is impressive how badly the New York Fury, which is the actual
it feels like they
fucked up, right? Like
they cursed themselves with their own name. I feel like this was like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
They have like 5 players who should be really good. Like not 6 months ago, I was saying like Neptune's one of the best raises in NA, right? He's on this team, shot up, really solid player. Odorous and your boy Dre obviously haven't had the highest success at the the top end of Valorant, but still like capable players. These guys are losing like consistently in like round of 32, round of 16 in tier 2 tournaments. There is no logical reason that this team should be this bad. They have good players. It is phenomenal to me how bad they have done. So I am surprised at all that they this is one of the teams hitting the bench.
Yeah.
Yep.
I am more surprised that even NYXL as a company didn't have any chance of sniffing the next round, right? I don't know what their financial backing looks like, but obviously they've got an Overwatch team, which takes way too much damn money to own. So there's at least money there. But yeah, the team's been bad, man. Team's been bad. Yeah. And they're very odd.
Just looking at their recent results, right? Like the last NSG they played in, they lost to some team called Lycus Empire in the round of 32 in like an online quad.
They lose to nobodies in every
literally nobody on this team, Lycus Empire, has ever done anything worth any note, right?
Yep.
Like it is fascinating how poorly the Fury have performed.
Sam, you had a point there?
I just want to address something that was said in chat. So this, I was kind of toying with bringing it up on the show, and we were like, probably not important. But
the SK stuff?
The SK stuff, yeah. They dropped out because some sponsors have issues with the violence in the game. Apparently, that's becoming like a bit of an issue in Europe. But just to just touch on it lightly, like it's not going to be a major issue for the major organizations, but also you choose who your sponsors are. So if you want to play in a specific game and you know that a sponsor isn't going to like it, well, you have to decide. You either play the game or you pick the sponsor. It is what it is.
SK Gaming has always been weird and squeamish about this since they dropped their CS roster. The whole point, I don't think this is a big concern for Valorant, because the whole point of Valorant was to be the more cartoony, friendly, love and hug 'em version of CS, right? So it's not terrorists and counter-terrorists and blood and everything.
Yeah,
it's
you have to
people
have
turn into
off
little discs after
right?
they die. Yeah, everyone comes back. Yay! wee, like, so it's it is designed to be a more sponsor friendly FPS. I think it'll be fine.
And even then, yeah. But
I
still,
mean,
yeah,
sure.
they finally got it
Everybody's not gonna
approved
like
in
it.
China.
I mean,
so,
literally, as a German company, Germans are incredibly sensitive to depictions of violence for some obvious
which
reasons.
is fascinating.
Yes. But I mean,
But
obvious
yes.
historical reasons. But German media is very sensitive, and sponsorships are very sensitive to guns, and any particular
fair enough.
Yeah.
depiction of gun violence. So that's
Just
not
is
too
what
surprising.
it is. Yeah.
Still, all right, should we just talk about like franchise apocalypse in general? Because this was going to happen. People have been screaming that this was going to happen really since the beginning of Valorant, and anyone who was paying attention knew that this was going to happen at some point, that the
Yes.
squeeze was going to come in. It was the Wild West of Valorant up until this point, and it's still going to be a bit of the Wild West, but holy shit, the law is coming, and a lot of people are losing their hustle in the meantime. Like this, in North America in particular, we've had this massively big scene, and honestly it's looked pretty damn good from the outside, where you have 20 salaried teams. Maybe most of them aren't getting good salaries, but that's still insane for an NA
That's
esport.
still way better than literally any other esport, probably.
Yeah, it's nuts. Everyone was hoping to get their piece. It was a gold rush. Everyone was hoping to get their stake in and somehow be in contention for franchising. And here's where it's going to change. The teams that got in, the teams that got their stake, the teams that established themselves, like the Guard, who are probably going to be in contention for these kind of things. That's a new org that really started with Valorant, right? But teams that didn't.
Overwatch.
Well, yeah, the Guard
It's an offshoot
brand
of the
in and of
Gladiators,
itself,
yes.
sure.
Yeah.
But the actual, I mean,
There's actual
they
financial
a lot.
backing, but so is there for the NYXL. It's like the NYXL, right? The NYXL did not succeed in establishing themselves in Valorant. They did a weird rebrand. Their teams haven't been good. Their best players have gone to other teams. And so they're out, whereas a team like the Guard is in. And here's where the culling comes in. And it is not going to be all happy, sunny days like it has been in Valorant. A lot of people are losing their jobs, and they're not going to get new ones. That's the problem.
I will say that I think that a lot of it isn't just around, like, okay, so we talk about stability being important, right? So NYXL, right? Big organization, they've got money, they've been around the block, blah, 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 blah. They haven't been able to hold on to a team ever.
Yeah.
They're constantly changing. There is no, what's the word I just said? Like staying power for their players. There's no reassurance. And I think that heavily counts against them. I think that a lot of teams, sorry, Paul, just a lot of teams before the franchising system was announced were like, oh, we'll get a team and we'll prove that we can have franchising. And then Riot came out and said, so this is how we're going to do it. We're going to look at how sustainable you are and can you look after your players and blah, 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 blah. We don't actually care how you've done in the last 6 months. We're looking long term and can you? And all the newish orgs were like, shit. So unfortunately, it is going to be rough for them.
Well, and I will say with the New York Fury specifically, just one last point before we move on. While the org of like the New York Excelsior definitely has a lot of money, it has never felt like the Fury have been operating on like the full unrestricted budget of whatever the organization has, right?
Sure.
It has always been smaller. They've always been willing to like lose their players to bigger teams with big salaries, right? They didn't have as competitive of investments as a lot of these other big orgs like that, have teams in other games like the Guard or like, Sentinels, Cloud9, right? Who are willing to come in and drop massive amounts of money, right?
Yeah. The one I'm really interested in, I'm going to do one last note before we move on. The one I'm going to be really interested to see what happens with them is Complexity. Because Complexity is a historically North American organization that's been around for a very, very long time. They have tenure in a way that no one else does. They have stable backing. They've made smart money moves pretty much throughout their whole tenure. They dip when people dodge. They didn't buy an Overwatch team, which shows they have brains. No, sorry, guys.
Hell, man.
I know, but I'm not wrong. That's the thing.
It's true.
Their team's been shit pretty much throughout their tenure in Valorant. So that's going to be a really interesting one where I'm curious to see what happens with Complexity as opposed to some other organizations. We'll move on from this conversation now because we're already well in. But I will say to all of you fans listening, it's not going to end here. There will be more teams. It's going to be a bit of a bloodbath as teams get eliminated. It's going to be rough. We're going to blow through.
Poaching season is going to go nuts.
Also true. We're going to blow through a couple of these next stories. This one, Salah and Strong, Joe Edwards, are moving over to coaching OG. They're joining Bambino, who's assistant coach. It is kind of funny that Salah's the head coach, but he's not in the center. A little bit of an odd graphic thing, but Bambino was already on the team. But I will say they just came off of a crew as well, so good for them for getting jobs.
Sure.
Joe is a friend of the show. He's been on a few times, so we always like seeing him employed. I'm just gonna move on from that because we don't have time. So
Yeah.
we'll just keep going. Na'Vi have a team, Celestials. They've got a women's Valorant team. That's dope. That's sick.
Nice.
Na'Vi,
Hella
obviously a
dope.
really dope organization. That's cool to see. It's probably a cool video, but Cody, we ain't got time. Keep going. Keep going, Cody. Kat is off of TSM. That's a bummer.
Oof.
Kat's been around and competing for a long time in FPS. She gone. They're rerouting. They're regrouping. We'll see how they do when we see their next pieces. Keep going. Keep
Bro, Mike's
moving.
speed
Keep
running,
going.
dude.
Bro,
We got other big
80%
stories
run.
to hit. Lakia
Is this a
is on
podcast
Dem
or
One.
a?
Back on competing in Korean teams. That's cool. Love Lakia. Miss Lakia in international competition. Hopefully
Really
he can
do,
get back
man.
there. Damn, one are
Hopefully he's on a
making some
team that
serious
lets him
changes.
play.
Yes, in Korea.
Truly.
So that's sick. We love to see it. Shout outs, Lakia. Let's get him back in competition. Moving on. Here's the big story. All right, here's
There
where I
we
want to
go.
speed us through. Holy shit, Sentinels. They have gone crazy. They
The number of
signed
people that thought this was a troll.
Dude, I mean, Shroud.
Bruh.
He's a fucking streamer. Pardon my French. He's been out of competition for like 3 years now.
It feels like they're going for the real stream team dream.
But it is literally just the most genius move. There's no way to lose with
Oh, yeah.
this, right? Because
Yeah.
Sentinels were barely even made it to the LCQ.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they like Six not going to be able to play. They weren't really like vibing with a couple of their new additions, right? So what do? They just throw in the biggest possible name that they can find and
Yep.
say, "Hey guys, if we're going to lose, then we're going to do it with style
Well,
and we're going to
yeah.
make money while we do
That,
it."
that was
Yeah,
my
I mean,
tweet.
this is
was,
all about content now.
If we're not good, we might as well be marketable as hell.
Exactly.
But I will say the next move is interesting as well, which we'll talk about in a second. But holy
Sure.
shit,
Well-
Shroud's back in competition.
Also, could you imagine, right, in the 1 in 15 billion chance that they actually make it out of LCQ with
Bro.
Shroud?
Viewership
It's
numbers
been
gonna go
nuts.
bonkers.
How much money that they would make?
Yeah.
Dude, somebody
Right? That
tweeted.
would just be nuts.
Somebody tweeted that the NALCQ is about to have more viewers than Masters.
Honestly,
And they're not wrong.
Genuinely true. Genuinely true. All of Shroud's stream will be tuning in. So the other
that's
move they
crazy.
make, so that Shroud's obviously coming in to stand in for Sick, who is indefinitely taking some time off for whatever reason. We don't know. It's personal. Not going to get into that. Zelsis is added to the roster, and they're getting rid of Kempeki. Kempeki was the new addition, came over from a crew, didn't necessarily
Sure.
go their way, although he didn't really seem to be the massive issue. But Zelsis
Yeah.
comes in. Zelsis is obviously a huge asset, played very well for version 1, the face of that team, considered a really top end player in Valorant by many, comes into the Sentinels roster. So how do we feel about Sentinels plus Shroud plus Zelsis? How do we feel about this, Sam?
There's definitely the level up of Zelsis, 100%. I mean, we saw how version 1 struggled without him previously. And okay, a lot of that had to do with like the last minute nature of it, but it has an impact. So I think that in itself is a good pickup. Kempeki is a good player, but I mean, this is Zelsis. He's proven himself in so many more ways, and he's a really, really good player. The Shroud pickup, I'm very much on the fence about. Because yes, he's a streamer, but he has played competitive in the past. He's not famous just for the sake of being famous. He has built a name for himself as being one of the best at a time, and now he's making his way back in. And it's not like he spent the last 3 years plowing the fields. He's still been playing, admittedly less seriously than in an actual competitive environment, but he's still kept on top of his skills. So I think that this is going to be a lot. I think we're going to see a much better Sentinels than we've seen previously. That being said, I'm not sure it's going to be enough to get them to champs. I can see them getting a reasonably deep run in LCQ, but I don't think they get to champs.
I would be absolutely shocked if they made it a chance.
Honestly.
But I will say that with the Zelsis edition, I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility that they do decently at LCQ, right? I actually think so. I was super excited for Kempeki when he joined Sentinels because Kempeki is a really good like that flashing initiator, right? Like that secondary, but it never really felt like him and Tens were able to sync up for more than like one map out of every 5. I think Zelsis will. There's an opportunity for Zelsis to more effectively kind of play in tandem with Tens, and that's when Sentinels really succeeded. And I think that can actually be really good for the idea of Sentinels. If we want to win, Tens needs to kill everything. So if Zelsis can get up and help Tens kill everything, I think they're going to perform better. Not necessarily winning LCQ better, but better.
I know you all expected me to probably be really cynical about this, but I'm actually Sentinels pilled about this. I'm gonna break down why I actually think this is gonna work. Keith's in chat, by the way, La Fortune, formerly known as the man formerly known as Seaside, saying Shroud was one of the most disappointing players in CS history, and he's right. And here's the thing: for anyone who didn't follow CS back when Shroud was competing, Shroud is a mechanical god. He's always been a mechanical god. He rose to prominence through insane stream clips and the like, right? Like that's how he got his spot. He never realized that promise on the old Cloud9 roster because he never quite had things click on competition. He never quite had things click in the big moments. He never quite had the same game sense. CS becomes more than just being a mechanical god game. It is extremely cerebral. Valorant is extremely cerebral as well, but it's also newer in the life cycle of the game still. So you haven't necessarily had that depth of knowledge yet. The other thing is the meta changes constantly, which also prevents the same level of mastery to a more static game. Shroud is a mechanical god, man. So just purely on an individual basis, he's the kind of guy who just picks up a game and shouldn't be good at it and is incredible. He's also just the ultimate video gamer if he's not the ultimate in any one game. So I think from a mechanical perspective, I'm not terribly worried. What's really exciting about this is one of the issues towards the end of his tenure in CS and really throughout his tenure in CS is that he was torn between the poles of streaming and competing. The motivation wasn't necessarily there. It's why you saw him become a full-time streamer. Well, right now, this represents a perfect opportunity for Shroud because there's probably been some thought in the back of his mind throughout the tenure of Valorant of, what if I went back to competition? But he knows logically that that's a stupid idea from his perspective. He makes way more money doing what he does to ever go back competing full-time and have it make sense. But this represents a perfect window as a stand-in where he goes for the next however many months through LCQ, potentially into champs. I'm going to be a competitor. I'm going to answer that question in the back of my brain of, can I still do this? How good would I be in Valorant? And, satisfy that urge before I can go back and just make shit tons of money streaming. So he's going to be motivated. He's going to be dedicated. This is actually going to be the focus. Do I think it'll last? No, I don't think Shroud's ever going to be a full-time competitor. He would, again, be insane if he did. Well, he'd be insane if he gave up the millions upon millions that he makes every year streaming to play for Sentinels. But
that'd be
in
crazy.
This context, it's the perfect environment for his individual motivation to be peak. Now, extending that beyond, I think Zelsis is a big pickup. I don't really need to argue that one. He's a great player to get. I think everybody else on this roster is going to find some drive from the addition of Shroud. Because with the exception of Shazam, who is actually one of Shroud's peers, arguably, in their come up competing in CS, all of these have grown up looking up to Shroud to some degree. Everyone in NA looked up to Shroud to some degree. He was the hot shit for so many people. There's a reason he's got such a big brand now. So I think for these remaining players, for Dapper and Tens, who have maybe stagnated a little bit within this roster, motivations maybe been down, that kind of thing, I think this is a shot in the ass to really perk you back up. You're playing with fucking Shroud, man. It's wild. Zelsis, your buddy, is on the team now, right? Like, I feel like this is a shot in the arm to get the other members of the roster perked up as well and get them more dedicated and get them excited and believing again. So from that perspective, for all those reasons, I am in. I'm buying Sentinel stock. Do I think they're going to make it? I don't know, but it's going to be a hell of a show. And God help all the teams that have to come up against them because they have low seed, right? Like this is going to be a much more interesting Sentinels team than it was.
I will say to La Fortune's point, if you follow the narrative that all the best Valorant players are washed out CS players, I mean,
Shroud is more akin to a Scream than he is to a lot of, he's a mechanical god. That's his thing.
And I'm going to be honest.
Looking
at
good.
the LCQ teams, right? Looking at the LCQ teams, I don't think there's anyone where I'm like, yeah, they're unbeatable. They're the ones go. It's like Guard, who's good, but they've been struggling recently. FaZe Clan, who's all over the place.
Guard, who's supposed to have like the 8 seed in this LCQ. Instead, they've got fucking Shroud and Celsius on Sentinels. Oof. Like, what?
Yeah, it's... there's an outside chance. There's an outside chance.
There really is. I will also say, I think it's hilarious that Tens, who I basically view as Valorant's Shroud, and Shroud are now on the same team.
On the same team.
I view them as very close, where Tens has this insane mechanical promise, but hasn't necessarily put the full picture together.
Sure.
And also is torn between that draw to stream and become a content creator, because whenever he decides to make that move, if he decides to make that move, he'll be massively successful at it. He's realistically already massively successful at it. So it's like literally Tens is the Shroud of Valorant. And
I'm seeing. Hold on. I gotta just get in here real quick. I'm seeing a lot of people say C9 can beat the Sentinels. You guys remember how like stage 2 went for C9, right? Like you guys remember they got shit on. They did awful in stage 2. Why do you guys have faith in C9 right now? 100 Thieves. I like that take. A couple of 100 Thieves.
I think
in the
C9's
chat.
gonna be.
I think that's a good take. What are you talking about with C9?
I think you're discounting C9, forgetting about how stupid the timing of their roster move was. I think they'll be better this time around.
Yeah, but it didn't get better over like the course of stage. I mean, they've had time. I'm not discounting C9 as a potential team, but like, why do you guys have that automatic faith? C9 are gonna win out.
I also think it's
now you're just trying to trigger pull.
Possible that there's gonna be another move here.
Oh. Wait, another move where?
From C9. When's last chance qualifier? The 7th.
Soon TM?
Yeah, it's the 7th of August. I think there could be another change coming in the meantime. I'm kind of curious.
They're not a bad team. I'm not trying to say they're like, they're trash and they're never going to do anything and going to double lose. I'm just surprised how much faith people had in C9 considering how awful they looked at.
I think LCQ is wide the heck open. I think it's very
I'd
open.
agree.
I think it's going to be amazing.
Wild and spicy, and I'm incredibly excited to see what it actually looks like. But we'll see. We'll see what that winds up looking at. We should probably move on.
We gotta move.
We've
done our
We've done our 10, 15 minutes on Sentinels. But I mean, you could not talk about this. All right.
Oh yeah, obviously.
Paul, I said you'd have 10 minutes.
I'm gonna blow the show.
You're not gonna have 10 minutes. Collegiate Circuit is announced by Riot. This is just the Paul section. Paul, take the floor.
I am super excited about this for a number of reasons. I'm going to blow through them really quick. One, it's separated into several different regions across like the 4 servers that you can see in that tweet, which is really cool because one of the biggest problems in Collegiate Valorant is how server selection has gone in a lot of these tournaments. It is the number one stink that a college team will give any tournament organizer is how the server selection goes. So it's like 4 regions, and at the end of the year, they all meet at a LAN. Awesome. The other thing is Riot incorporating and opening up submissions for third-party organizers to help them put these tournaments on in the broadcast. So all of these like organizations that have been doing the groundwork and setting up all of this Collegiate Valorant so that we got to the point where we're having like one massive LAN a year already. They don't just get like left on the side. They don't get the boot as Riot steps in, right? They actually get to be incorporated into the system. And 3, I just love the fact that we get a LAN final at the end of the year. That's so awesome. I know every single player in Collegiate Valorant wants to make it to a LAN final. That is 100% what all of them want to do all of the time. So this is just like, from head to toe, I was shocked reading through this because I couldn't find like a single major problem with this system. It's just really well done.
Cool. Dope. Read it up yourself.
I really hope we get another campus clutch as well.
Also, college players are really good. Pay attention.
True.
Anyways.
Apparently, this is actually relevant. Apparently, some college teams are going to be trying to poach like pro players with like scholarships and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the leagues, if you look at C-LOL, right? Something like 40% of the top college League of Legends players participated in Proving Grounds, which is like where tier 2 meets like the academy, and they do really well. A lot of the best like tier 3 or like amateur rosters into tier 2 almost academy, right, come from that collegiate system that Riot has set up. It's really cool.
Well, especially with the contraction of the scene in general, it's going to make a lot of sense for a lot of players to potentially pursue this as a fallback.
You lose your spot on Fury or on Soar. I know a lot of colleges who are offering quite a bit of scholarships.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a good idea. We've seen it in CS as well and other esports as well. The collegiate scene is expanding all over in terms of esports. It's dope to see. We'll move on. Let's get into Masters. Because we're 40 minutes through our show, and we're finally going to talk about Masters Copenhagen. We're into the top 4 here. we've narrowed it down to 4 teams. This has been a banging bracket. Although I will say, first off, it's usual complaint. What the fuck, guys? Stop putting NA against NA first round. Stop putting EMEA against EMEA first round. All 3 EMEA teams are on the same side of the bracket. What the hell,
It's
Riot? That was our
insane.
one request. Was no NA against NA matchup first round, and you did it again. You did it again.
Yep. Like, so I had an argument about this that I think I made like 2 weeks ago, which I think comes down to like they want more regional representation. So have the regions with lots of teams knock each other out.
Yeah, sure.
You know, but at the same time, that's a load of crap, and it shouldn't be a thing. Like, that's nonsense.
It's so
I don't know.
dumb. It's so they don't do that for League, right?
I know. It
Right?
makes
It's
no
not.
sense.
They don't put all the Korean teams in the same side of the bracket at Worlds when there's 4 of them in the finals or whatever, right? They're like, oh, you
God.
can't play each other in the first round, but in Valorant, it's like, oh no, you're gonna be eliminated immediately by your own region.
Poor
XZ flew halfway. XZ and the Guard flew halfway across the world to lose to Optic in the first round.
The NA curse, man. I actually tweeted this. Like, the God versus XZ, they had like the same path. They dominated through their stage. They obviously got through to playoffs immediately, so they didn't have to play in the groups, which is a detriment. Any team will tell you this is not actually a good thing. It is bad. And then they get into playoffs and they get immediately knocked out in their first 2 games. Like, it is so dumb because, and I specifically say it's a bad thing because look at Optic. They're doing the exact same thing that they did last time. They come second. They lose their very first match to a team that no one expected them to lose to. And then they have time to adapt. Whereas the teams in playoffs don't have that time. All they're doing, okay, sure, you can watch the games and you can make notes and anti-strat, but without the actual physical practice that goes with it, you are at a severe disadvantage as opposed to every other team. And I think what I would say further proves this point. I mean, you look at like Fnatic and Paper Rex who are still in. Also, just shout out to like 2 weeks ago when everyone said, who's your underdog or your dark horse? And I said Paper Rex. Yeah.
Just give yourself the quick,
Honestly,
Paul didn't
so
even
they're
believe.
kind of the outliers in that one. They immediately got into playoffs and they clearly deserved it. But like the other teams that made it immediately into playoffs, not so great, which is why it's a stupid system.
I will say, I think I have a qualifier on the. I do agree that it's a stupid system to put teams directly through into playoffs. I think that's just dumb. It makes no sense. It's not good. It doesn't make it competitive. But what I will say is I think the difference is if you're an experienced team, it's an advantage to be straight through into playoffs. Like if Optic were straight through into playoffs, that's great. I think it sucks for a team like XZ where this is their first international stint and it's tough to compete for the first time internationally. I think the Guard was in a similar boat. You don't have time to get those nerves, those land nerves out of the way before it's like, oh, we're done. That's a bit of a problem. But let's focus on who's still here now because we do still have teams that are here now. Paper Rex, Optic, upper bracket final. Hell yeah. Optic's going to win it all. Of course, it's preordained. It's written in the stars. But how do we feel about these two teams? Do these two teams do these two teams deserve to be here?
good.
Do they deserve to be in the upper bracket?
100%.
Yeah.
110%.
I don't think there's any question. I mean, you look at the game where like Paper X versus Fnatic, right?
What a game.
I think the vast majority of people, myself included, came into Masters and were like, Fnatic is the team to beat, right? They look so like tactically intelligent. They look like they are just completely dismantling all of the opponents they played. But then you remember, oh, they're playing EU teams, and EU teams, take 30 minutes to play a single round. Well, what I mean, Sam, is that EU plays a very tactical game, right? Yeah. They play a very smart game. They play a very, very strategic game. None of that matters when Jing just bowls over you. When he just run and guns
Dude,
the
I have
Spectre,
the same argument for Optic.
He flies into heaven. It was what? A minute 30 still left on the clock. It literally took him 10 seconds into the round or something, 20 seconds to get into like heaven on bind, right? There's no way to like anti-strat that. There's no way to do that. Right.
That's
Fnatic,
literally like I think
it was a very bad stylistic matchup for Fnatic, but it just goes to show like Paper X are very good. And
I think it was the exact same argument for DRX Optic because I'm watching this game and I'm like, DRX are running tactical circles around Optic. Optic have no idea what's going on, but Yay exists.
Yay!
And therefore,
Yay's a hard carry, dude. Oh my!
Bro, he got what? Op 4K or something in one of the rounds, or an op ace.
He's plus
we
21.
literally just said, "Get in, losers!
Plus-
We're
plus
going to
21 in
fucking
the
playoffs."
series.
That's
No,
not even
it
the
was
most impressive
nuts.
part. to
Plus
me.
15 in
He was
first
plus
kills.
15 on first kills,
Oh my
dude.
God.
He got 20 first
Literally,
kills.
He had
No
more
one-
that series.
first kills than DRX had kills
Well,
in one of the fucking
no,
maps. It was
DRX didn't have a single player positive in the first kill, first death, and then Ye has plus 15.
nuts.
He was El
Let-
Diablo for sure.
Let's also keep in mind he got
Honestly.
20 first kills, and like even though it was a 3-map series, 2 of those maps were really fucking quick, right?
And the thing is, I feel like we can't mention
It's
Ye
what,
without mentioning
17?
Marved, right? Like Marved isn't necessarily that super pop-off high. Don't get me wrong, he is very good at the gunning and the shooting. But as a controller, he does so much to like create space for Ye. So when the two of them simply exist on a team, much like Paper X versus Fnatic, your strats do not matter here because we exist.
There were just over 50 rounds across the 3 maps of that series, and he got 20 first kills. That's almost every other round where Ye is getting a first kill.
It's nuts.
But this is why I hate Optic. And I will say it loud and proud. I do not like a team that relies on 2 people
How
existing.
dare you have good players?
Sam,
I'm
get good.
sorry.
Get good,
No, have
EMEA.
5 good players
better.
and have tactics.
Be
Don't
better.
just have 2 good players
Why
that
have-
put the rest
Bro,
of
Why
you
the
have
say that-
tactic
you
when
say
just
that-
click head?
Okay, but you say that.
God.
Did you? I feel like you are just like turning your head away from the Fnatic versus Leviathan game where Boaster
Oh my
absolutely
God, that game.
saved their ass.
Dude, boasted with a 4K op run.
Like-
You were asleep! And I was so sad because I had no one to geek out about it with. I
was
hate you for
asleep.
that.
Hey, it's not my fault that
Sucks.
you know, Korea exists and I don't live there and I have to cast games there.
Oh,
That is a
man.
thing.
Sleepy time.
That is a thing. Sleepy time happens.
I should
We'll
be
talk about
asleep
Fnatic in a
now.
second here. All right. So suffice it to say, Paper X versus Optic is going to be a banging game. Very excited
And
for
Hell
it.
yes.
I think
Fireworks,
it's
fireworks,
very different than
fireworks.
the 2 semifinals too, because it's not that tactical mismatch, right?
Mhm.
It is both
Yeah.
these teams. They don't play similar styles, but like they have that same sort of like
Yeah, you just
what am
gonna
I
do
looking
one
for?
of these and just rip
that
them in
same like
half.
yeah, like the spark, right? Like it's
Yeah.
very flashy. That's what I'm trying to say, right? So I don't think either one is as liable to get caught off by the other's style.
Mm-hmm.
I'm here for it. I'm here for this
It's gonna be
matchup.
Yeah.
awesome.
Let's talk about FPX and Fnatic,
Amazing.
though. Let's dive into the lowers. FPX, Fnatic in the lowers, an EMEA matchup. EMEA will eliminate EMEA here, guaranteed. We're getting
God.
another one of these. It was the matchup in the first round as well. Fnatic 2-0 FPX. Is that going to happen again? Oh, first question. Do both these teams deserve to be here?
I'd say so.
Yeah.
I think that given FPX's issues, the fact that they've been able to make such a deep run, despite the fact that they had to play with a sub for the entirety of groups and the first game of playoffs, like, well done.
Yeah.
Well done. You
I-
know, like you deserve it. And Fnatic, I mean, we all said they were the team to watch coming into this. And while they haven't been as flashy as maybe we expected, they haven't been a disappointment per se. Okay, the
Sure.
Paper X game was a bit, but aside from that, they've,
Uh,
shown they deserve to be here.
I think that there's an outside argument that DRX, if they could figure out how to stop getting mentally boomed after getting sent down to the lower bracket, maybe they would be in this situation instead. But the fact of the matter is, every time DRX loses a series, they just disappear. They explode,
Yeah.
right? Like I watched that DRX Optic game and I was like, oh my God, is it? You know, Sam, you were messaging me like, do you finally believe in DRX? And I was like, I can't do it. The second
No.
I believe, it'll happen. And lo and behold, DRX go down to the lower bracket and they're gone. That is just not the same team that played FPX in the lowers as played Optic in the like upper bracket semifinal. It is fascinating.
Yeah. Oh, Sam?
I'm super excited about the FPX Fnatic matchup purely because so they played each other in the finals of stage 2,
Mhm.
actual challenges, and at the time there was a lot of stress. You know, Angel was worried about whether he was going to get bombed in the middle of the game. You know, that could put a bit of a damper on how well you perform.
Just a bit.
And then they come into groups and Suigetsu isn't able to join them, so they have to play with Cider, who, to be fair, did really well considering he was this last minute step in. But that's always going to be a detriment. I mean, when we were doing our predictions, we were just like, I don't know if FPX even makes it out of groups.
Well, we didn't even know if they were going to have one or two stand-ins too.
Yeah, that's true. So it was really rough. And then they get into playoffs. Now they're coming up against Fnatic. And okay, there is obviously that shadow over their heads of we lost to them in finals, we lost to them in the upper bracket, but they have their full team now. Like actual full team, because if I remember correctly, Cider played in the game in the playoffs because Sugetsu hadn't arrived yet. But now they've got Sugetsu back. They're at their full power. Nobody's worried about getting killed by a bomb. I think that this could potentially be a good match. And to be fair, the match in the finals, 2 of the maps went into overtime, even with all of that crap going on. So I think that this is going to be just as much of a banger as the Optic Paper X game.
So here's the question. Go ahead, Paul.
Oh, I was just going to say, I actually think that there's a reasonable argument to be made that you should expect whoever wins the FPX Fnatic match to make it to the finals.
That was about to be my question. Obviously, Fnatic just lost to Paper X 2-0.
I think if Fnatic gets a rematch against Paper X, though, they will like have better strats. Because you know, it's one of those things where, especially a cerebral team like Fnatic, there's no doubt in my they have a week to prep, right? They have a whole week between their loss to Paper X and the next time they might potentially play them this upcoming weekend, right? There is no doubt that they reviewed all of the footage from that game, right? Every single moment has been looked over with a microscope. So I would find it surprising if Fnatic weren't able to come up with reasonable counter strats should they meet Paper X again.
But I mean, we always talk about it, the power of the run back. I mean, didn't that happen in the last Masters with Loud and Optic as well?
Yeah.
Like, the run back is a very potent tool. So there is a world where Fnatic beats FPX, they beat Paper X in the rematch, assuming, of course, Optic wins that game, which I think they probably will, and then wind up in the grand finals. So there is an argument to be made there. However, I honestly think that FPX have a really good chance of taking it. I think that Durka has been, while still one of the very best chamber players in the world, I think that he hasn't had as much of a powerful performance as what we would have expected. Yeah. Like, you look at him from stage 2 to Masters, and it really does feel like he's being held back a little bit. And I feel like, you know, Mike, you said it as well, there's a lot of like reliance on Boaster, or Michael, Paul, one of you, fuck it, to pop off and to potentially save the round. And I think that is hugely problematic. It's something that I always complain about when I cast. I'm like, you can't be relying on this one player to do incredibly well to save you. And it's, as I said, why Optic frustrates me so much, because if that player is not online, then you're screwed. Sorry, I missed that. What did you say, Mike?
I said, unless their name is Ye. Ye's never off.
Ye is a you know what? If Ye has a bad day, Optic is through. No.
That's where Crashies reveals his final form and just clicks.
Well, but you know, and Marv has been the one to step up though for Optic, right? At least to a degree. When it's not Ye, Marv has been covering for that. Now it's obviously not as explosive as Ye. It's not, you know, 21st kills in 50 rounds. But Marv has been actually putting up like a surprisingly decent performance. Well, I shouldn't say surprisingly decent. He's one of, you know, the best controls in the world. But like, he's been doing he's been very consistently good, is what I'm trying to say, at this tournament, right? Which gives them leeway for Ye to have a bad map.
Okay. I'll allow it. I'll take it.
Now, 2 bad maps, then we run into problems.
The interesting point
bad map can happen.
The interesting point about Paper X as well that Stallion is bringing up is Paper X has been dealing with illness, with COVID specifically. Ravaged.
And there's 3 players in isolation.
They were rocked. It literally, like, they had a guy who could not talk. His voice was so messed up. I mean, that's like.
And apparently the coach was like trying not to throw up mid-game because he was also not feeling well. Like, can you imagine? Crazy, okay, guys, take a timeout. And then he gets halfway and he says, ugh!
Here's the other thing. Like, here's the other variable for both of these games. This is the first Valorant that any of these teams will play with a crowd.
Yep.
True.
That's
big.
That is a huge, for anyone who's just new into Valorant and hasn't necessarily seen the impact of a crowd. crowd is huge. The crowd is incredibly powerful in an FPS. I have seen teams go from being mediocre as hell to being absolute world beaters because they had a home crowd behind them. I have seen teams that were world beaters absolutely go quiet as a mouse because they got intimidated. Like, it is a game changer, and we genuinely don't know how most of these players will play until we see it. A few players on Optic I know have played with a crowd before. I know Ye has, I think, gotten deep enough in a major to play with a crowd, although it's been a while. I think Finesse has.
Probably a couple on the EMEA teams as well, I imagine.
Angel, definitely. I don't honestly know about everyone else. I'm just not as familiar with people's competitive backgrounds to where they would have played with it. But it's a difference maker. It is a huge difference maker. It's going to be a massive wild card. Some teams, I see someone saying heroic in chat. That's the classic, gods online, gods in studio, kind of mediocre when they have a crowd in front of them. So you will see teams change. There will be a team that is better than you expect them to be because they have crowd support. There will be a team that is worse than you expect them to be because they have crowd pressure. It is going to be a wild card that we cannot
predict.
Bearing
in mind that this is in EMEA, so the crowd is going to be fairly skewed if an EMEA team makes it to the finals.
That can be a benefit, but that can also be a
some players like to play the villain.
What exactly? Right? I can just see the smirks on Optic's faces if they go up against an EMEA team and start off hot, right?
Maybe.
The silence of an EMEA crowd.
I don't think so.
Bro, Optic never look happy.
I'm nervous about them.
They win Masters last season and they're just like, there was no happiness. There was no excitement.
I will say.
The game they had against DRX was loud. It was loud. They were going back and forth.
I don't know. I would like to see them feed into it, but I am a little bit nervous for Optic with a crowd. I'm very curious to see how they're going to respond to it. It's going to be a huge effect. Like, I think the only one we've had, Stallion again is saying there was the Japan finals, which is dope, but obviously none of those players are here.
North Africa did not make it here.
I'm very excited to see what this is actually going to look like with the crowd. I'm so happy. In CS, we've had crowds back for half a year now, and it is incredible. It's a huge difference maker. It's like, it is night and day. Stadium CS, Arena CS is incredible, and I'm hoping that it's going to be the same translation for Valorant.
Also, anyone in Copenhagen watching, I hate you.
Oh, no. Let's talk about the eliminated teams real quick, because we're coming to the end of our show, but I do want to mention them. Obviously, the teams that have been eliminated from playoffs, we already kind of talked about the teams that were eliminated groups. That's too many teams. We're not going to talk about them. XSET out. Get knocked out. They won one map, which is cool, but otherwise they get knocked out of playoffs. Disappointing for XSET, clearly. Do we think it's time to be dramatic, or do we think it's just it was your first international event?
I mean, they're not going to make roster cuts or anything crazy, but
they guaranteed a champ slot too, right? I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, they are.
I think so.
Yeah, they're guaranteed a champ slot. It's just a bit brutal. That this is how it shook up, right? And I feel bad, especially for like the younger players on this squad, right? You go halfway across the world to lose 2 maps to Optic. You play, admittedly, like a well-fought series against Leviathan, who I think have done better at this tournament than a lot of people expected coming in. But like it was certainly not the performance that a lot of people were hoping for from this team.
No.
Okay, we're being yelled at in chat. Apparently, they needed to win something to make champs.
Did they? I don't think they did.
They had to win for that champ slot.
No, I think by virtue
based
of
on
being
the
in
circuit
playoffs,
points I'm looking at, they have the most amount of circuit points.
I'm pretty sure
next
they
to
have
Optic,
it.
obviously. There are two automatic slots, and they have the second most circuit points in NA.
I don't think you earn any from. Yeah, you can't earn any circuit points from LCQ, so they have the slot. They do not need to win anything. They 100% have the slot.
XSET is in champs.
Okay. Valid.
Yeah. Cool. Pretty sure that was true.
To Paul's point, I feel like so we spoke about dark horses, and obviously I had mine as Paper X, but I feel like Leviathan really did do so much better. Like, to say that they did better than we expected feels like a grievous understatement, because their match against Fnatic was absolutely banging. That last map in particular that went into like triple overtime or something, it was absolutely insane. And for them to have gotten this far when they were relatively unknown, if you don't follow all of the regions.
For Leviathan.
this is what I'm saying, man. Everybody's power rankings, they're all the way down there with crew.
Even like a lot of the like LATAM people, right? Even they thought crew would perform better at internationals than Leviathan would, just because they'd had the experience.
Yeah, so I'm super impressed with them. I feel like DRX have performed about as well as we expect them to at this point. Like, it's kind of like this is as far as we get, and then we dip.
They need to figure something out, dude. Like there is just they hit a wall like over a year ago and have not gotten past it.
I mean, that got to be on the coaching staff, right? Like, that's if you think you have the talent, if you think you have the players, and your players are consistently hitting the same mental wall, that's got to be on the coaching staff. It has to be something there that changes from the mental side of things. And maybe they're content with being where they're at, but if they want to progress further on it, you'd imagine there has to be changes in approaches or philosophy.
Straight up, Stallion Adverso, what a god. Like, he was not on my radar, and now he is just like, I was so impressed. And for a Viper player, what? Yeah, no, he's such a boon for that team. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody tries to snatch him up from another region. I mean, he was really, really good.
Moving on down. What's been the match of the tournament so far? If someone hadn't watched any of these games and you wanted to recommend one series for them to go back and watch, what series would it be for you?
Fnatic Leviathan.
Yeah,
okay.
I felt like that was
either that or the DRX Optic game, right?
Yeah.
And I wouldn't even watch the first two maps of DRX Optic. I would just watch the last one.
Yeah. Okay.
That last map was insane. And I mean, but also, like, that last map was just, I think it's because when you get to map 3, the pressure is on, and generally speaking, both teams will, like, kick it up a notch. But they were probably two of the closest maps throughout the entire tournament.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, you know, two out of the 3 games went to OT, and the other one was a 13-10, right?
Yeah.
Just all 3 maps were really, really fucking good Valorant.
And what really made it cool was, like, the difference in style as well. Like, you're not seeing 2 teams running the exact same style into one another. So there's so much, like, adaptation going on. And we spoke about the cerebral part of Valorant. And I feel like that was so prominent in both of those games, along with, you know, Ye and Boaster existing.
We do enjoy them existing. All right, last question before we wrap up the show. Who's winning? Who's winning the dang thing? Who's your prediction? Out of these 4 teams, who's winning? Sam's on the Paper X all the way. Paul,
I'm on that
who you got taking the dub?
Come on, Paul.
Who you got?
Fuck it, Optic.
Yeah! That's right.
So boring.
Optic Gaming, NA's champion.
I gotta go with NA, dude. I gotta go with NA.
Cementing themselves as the best team in the goddamn world. They're doing it again. They're doing it again. You heard it here first, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in to Press Forward to Defuse, your weekly spot for Valorant esports news and discussion. We are live every week at 1 p.m. Eastern, mostly every week, except when we overlap with champs. Mostly every week.
Or when both of you are gone.
You can find guests. Come on, Paul. Get to work.
Nobody likes me.
I will help you find
even
guests.
You two.
Go find guests.
I like you.
I'm getting on a sailboat next week. So, yeah, I don't like you more than I like getting on a sailboat for a couple weeks.
Valid,
I will
honestly.
say that much.
Fair enough.
I don't know if there's many people I like more than that. So, yeah, I'm going to be gone for a while. But thank you so much for tuning in. It was a great episode. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye, everyone.